here today. Today's presentation or oral panel is entitled Voices from Mount Pleasant 2016. This is about my third year coming to, Lucia?
Yeah.
Have a seat. This is my third year coming to such presentation, and every time, I just love it. Every time I come, I see that different themes emerge throughout the interviews that they conduct. I want to thank Ms. Barbara Bird, who is here, and her grandchildren. So we'll round of applause. She gets to co-facilitate, and she really has a big part in the interviews. Today, the students will be presenting oral history excerpts of the interviews, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Brandis.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for attending our segment of the Research and Art Symposium. Personally, I think it is a very important event to attend, and I'm really glad that Dr. Swarzy was able to get our class in to speak for it. To kick off, I'm going to give you a little background on what our class is. We're an ECG 200 class titled Democracy and Diversity. Throughout the semester, we discussed different topics such as community and ourselves, community difference, democracy, difference, economic inequality, justice, the ideas of a good life, and justice and diversity together. Our projects are a collection of interviews with people from a community right down the road on Upper Gulf called Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant is made up of 3 streets, Henry Avenue, Fairview Avenue, and Mount Pleasant Avenue. Mount Pleasant is a community that is slowly withering away to realtors, but it is very sad because it has a lot of history that it needs to tell. Mount Pleasant was discovered by Dr. Swarzy. He took it upon herself to make connections with fellow people in the community, such as Barbara Bird, who is pointed out is over here. Together, Barbara and Dr. Swarzy worked together to create this project that we are now going to present to you today. Barbara is a very involved member in the community and was willing enough to talk to local community members and arrange for us to have these interviews. Today, we'll hear stories and interviews from Sean Jackson, Deborah Jones-Ford, Homer McLean, Ricky Shipman, Loraz Long, Keith Hayes, and Ruth and John King. Each of these individuals has their own unique experience that they've shared with us, and now we get to share with you. Our hope is that you get to take these stories with you and know Mount Pleasant better, and as well as the history, and you can share it with others, so Mount Pleasant can stay alive.
I'm going to be reading to you guys the voice of Ricky Shipman, who moved to Mount Pleasant in the 60s. In the 60s, I was little, a young kid, 3 or 4 years old, and Mount Pleasant is where I saw my first white person. I'd never seen a white person until I came here. They had so-called white people in North Carolina, where I came from. We had farms where I was raised. My mother's farm was a peanut farm. Across from my mother's farm was my father's farm, where he did anything and everything. Cows, pigs, chickens, fish, the whole 9 yards. He did it. Vegetables, all sorts of things like that. My parents just wanted to get out from North Carolina because it was too segregated down there, and they wanted a better life for us. You know the AT&T building in Wayne? That was the biggest building I'd ever seen before moving to Wayne. Seriously, when we got here, we didn't even know how to use the bathroom. Toilet, sink, tub, what is that? We lived on a farm. We didn't have those things.
I'm going to be reading part of our interview with Keith Hayes, a longtime resident of Mount Pleasant. When I was a kid, the kids from all 3 streets, Mount Pleasant Avenue, Henry Avenue, and Fairview Avenue, we had the community center where we would get together, and now the kids these days, they would play at the new parks. We had the creek back at the end of the cul-de-sac near his house, at the end of Mount Pleasant Ave, before the development was there, where they would go and swim. There was a field, my parents and everybody would go down the street, and we would love to play baseball. The girls and the guys would all play together back in the 70s and 80s. The Devon Honda was over there in Devon, and everyone had the mini bikes from the Devon Honda. The street divided into 2 townships, and we had no problems with the cops. I'm a little detached from the youth now, so I don't know what they do now, but we used to utilize the whole neighborhood playing hide and seek.
I'll be reading our interview with Deborah Jones Ford, a periodic resident of Mount Pleasant whose family lived off and on in Mount Pleasant. I would say I was very blessed to have grown up the way we grew up. Like it was fun. It was a lot of playing and playing. I decided when I came up here for this interview, I'm going to drive to see how far we walk to the bus stop, because you see how everybody has bus stops now at the end of their driveway. There was only one bus stop and we had to walk a mile to our bus stop, and we used to cut behind one of the houses and go through the woods, over the trail through the woods to get to the bus stop. They finally got it closer at the top of Fletcher Road, about a half mile. Our parents complained, but of course that didn't work. Even today they dropped them off at the top of Mount Pleasant Avenue. Everywhere else it is in front of their driveway, and we had no parents there walking us to that. I mean, we walked a half mile in the rain, snow, and sleet. No pants allowed. You weren't allowed to wear pants in those days. It was a skirt, even in the winter. I can remember the rubber boots would be chafing the legs in the cold. These kids don't know how good they have it.
I'll be reading John King Jr., who is also a student at Upper Marion High School and shared similar experiences. When I went to high school, there must have been about 6 black people in that high school. And like I was saying, 4 or 5 of those could have been my neighbors I grew up with. I mean, there were no blacks I knew of in King of Prussia. There might have been some in the little town called West Conshohocken. Bridgeport had their own high school, but then combined with Upper Marion, so we had West Conshohocken and Bridgeport. There was a lot of Polish people, Russians. I was melting pot in Bridgeport and West Conshohocken. When I first went to kindergarten, we went to a one-room schoolhouse in a place called Port Kennedy, but it was really in the back of Norristown, really back in King of Prussia, but a one-room schoolhouse. There was just one teacher, kids everywhere.
I'm reading an excerpt from our interview with Homer McLean on school days. I can talk about Conestoga High School. Junior high school, it was no better than high school. It was the same thing. You had your cliques in there like you did in all the other schools. You had the rich folks who thought they were the stuff and just hung around with themselves. All high schools are like that. It's like the heavy-set kids hung around with the heavy-set kids, and the skinny ones hung around with the skinny ones, and the people who don't talk to anybody, they just stuck around the people who didn't talk to anybody. I kind of like, a couple white guys hung around with us. We hung around together. We just got in a little trouble here and there, but no complaints. We're having a class reunion this year, so I'll see a few of them. I called one of them on the class reunion. He said, "I remember you." He's a white guy. "I remember you came to my 6 or 7-year-old birthday party." I kind of shook up the neighborhood, I guess, because I was the only colored there. But I knew everyone. We all knew each other in school, so we always played together. We didn't have a problem.
I'll be reading Sean Jackson, a nurse practitioner who grew up in Mount Pleasant. It's not a community anymore. When I was a kid growing up, even when my daughter was a kid, she's now 25, we knew all the neighbors. The neighbors knew all of us. If something would happen, someone would get a phone call. You would know what was going on in the community. But since the older population is dying off, their kids are selling the homes, and you have investors coming into the neighborhood. They're only coming into the neighborhood because of Cabrini, Eastern, and Villanova. They can double their money so they can pay for the house in 7 to 10 years off the student's rent. So that element makes it not so much community to me. It also kind of frustrates me because it's a transient population, and the kids don't really have a lot of respect for the neighborhood as a neighborhood. They come for a semester or a year, and I mean, I was a college kid at one point. I know what you do in college, but you still have to be conscious of the fact that it's a neighborhood, and you have families who have been here for years. It's not just my family who's been here for over 100 years. There are other families in the neighborhood who have been here, maybe not 100, but 90 plus. So for us, it's a little hard. But from a business perspective, I get it. I would just like them to be mindful of the fact that it's a neighborhood and treat it like your home, because this is our home. You know, it's not pleasant for me to see trash coming down the street, solo cups and the like. I know there was a party last night. It's fine if you had a party, just don't tear up the neighborhood.
I'll be reading Keith Hayes once again on the change in Mount Pleasant. Basically, this is an old community. It's diverse. It's a really good community. I grew up here, you know, and the old timers here really kind of set the bar. It's quiet. You know, things change, and along with change, you have different people coming into the neighborhood. But it's quiet down at this end. I don't really hear that much. I don't really hear anything. But one of my biggest pet peeves is the speed. This has always been a quiet street with kids playing in it. You have new and young people who are driving. I'm not discriminating against younger kids, but I'd like to see families more in these houses. However, anyone is allowed to live where they want if they're respectful. I'm cool, man.
I'll be reading from our interview with Sean Jackson and her feelings on the common renters. We wanted to put a cap on the number of properties that can be rented to college students. It was becoming unmanageable, as every property they wanted for sale, an investor bought it and put college students in. Again, it's not that investors want. We don't want it to appear that we don't want investors to come in and invest, because that's your right. You can do that, but at least think about us. Think about the property owners that have been here for years, that don't want to go anywhere. And think about where you live. Would you want your home environment inundated with 19 and 20-year-olds that are drinking every weekend? No, and we don't either. So that's all we're saying about that. Yes, there are fewer children here than before. Families either don't want to buy in the community because they think it's an African-American community, and they don't want to raise their children in this environment, which is no different from any other environment. Well, they don't know about it because when the properties come up, the investor sees it, buys it, and shuts it down. There's really no opportunity for families to even come in and see the property.
Sharing with you a piece from John King Jr., his memories on diversity. I was growing up in the 50s and 60s. I mean, naturally there was segregation. For one instance, this one friend has this 63 Chevy Impala. It was new, right? And the police stopped us as if we weren't supposed to be driving this new car. You know what I mean, right in the middle of Wayne. He was saying there were other cars, thieves, going around, so we need to check your car. See if it's really yours or whatnot. We were like, okay, whatever, you know. But there was a lot of stopping stuff, you know. There was never a lack of policemen coming through here, you know. I don't know why. There was never really a problem. But you always saw a police car for no reason at all.
I'll be reading a piece from Lavez Long on being a youngster in Mount Pleasant. My parents were young, so they were probably the youngest parents in the neighborhood, so they were really flexible. They both worked 2 jobs. A lot of times, our grandparents came to stay with us while they were working. So our house was most of the time the house where most of the kids would come and hang out and play kickball and things like that, because a lot of the other parents were a little more strict because they were older. When I was growing up, it was oh my gosh, it was the bestest neighborhood because everybody knew everybody and nobody really locked their doors back then. You know, we would be out late and playing until I had to go to sleep. But like our backyard was big, so we would play kickball and all the parents would kind of watch over everybody. Everybody would watch over the children for whoever's parents were working. It was awesome. I mean, I enjoyed growing up here.
I'll be reading another piece from John King Jr. on his experience with race in elementary school. I'll give you a for instance talking about the segregation stuff. I was in elementary school in a school called Roberts Elementary School that is in King of Prussia. I think we were being taught history. I think I was in the 4th grade. This girl was reading, she came upon the word Negro, but instead of pronouncing it Negro, she pronounced it nigger. So the teacher got up. How did you? I mean, she just laid her out. But it was like she was brought up that way, I guess. I mean, how can you pronounce it, looking at it Negro, and still say nigger? That's just some of the things that went on. I was upset, but I was only a kid. You know, 10 or 11 years old. I just felt like I didn't do anything wrong. I felt like crawling out of class. I felt that low. That's just some of the things that went on, you know?
The voice of Homer McLean, who grew up in Mount Pleasant and now lives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. If you go down the road past my old house, 3 or 4 houses down, that was Montgomery County. There were 4 white families that lived there. I didn't have any problem with them, and they didn't have any problems with me and my parents. But there are people who are in a pain in the butt. You know, they just didn't like anybody. We grew up with that. We used to go over to Wayne once in a while, and the cops were real prejudiced back in the day. But they all were. I mean, everywhere you went back in the day. You know, north, south, east, west, whatever. They all had their, you know, their white mind, and that was that. Like I said, nowadays this is not a white world anymore. You got everything here, if you know what I mean. Everything, all nationalities. Even down south. If you go down south, you have to be careful what you say or do. Nowadays, it's just a different world.
I'll be reading Ruth King, the wife of John King Jr., who was listening and couldn't help but get involved. Society has changed a lot within the last 30 or 40 years. You used to be my mother worked full time. I grew up in a low-income housing because we were poor. My parents were separated and there were three children to be fed. So my mom worked outside of the summer for that reason. We could always count on our neighbors to look out for us when my mom wasn't there. You don't see that a lot these days. Each family seems to do their own thing nowadays. I'm not sure what the reason for the change in society is. I think to a large degree people don't want to get involved in other people's business or other people's lives. Where I lived was a mixed community because it was low-income housing. There were blacks there and there were whites there. Anybody who couldn't afford their own home that needed to live in low-income housing, and we all got along because even though the color of our skin maybe or was different, we were all low-income dwellers. If you understand what I mean, we were all in the same boat. There weren't any rich people, you know. They lived up the street far away from where we were. We were all in the same boat because we were in a situation where we had nowhere else to go. And so both of us, we went to school with white kids. We didn't go to the same school, but I went to school. I had a few black kids in my class, not many, but we got along with all the white kids. We had no problems in dealing with them. I don't believe that I was ever really exposed to some of the racial issues that existed back in the 60s and 70s until I went to nursing school in Philadelphia. Because Philadelphia was a major metropolis, we were exposed to a lot of different things that you weren't exposed to around Williams. I didn't like the big city. It just wasn't for me, but I worked in Philadelphia for 22 years after I got done nursing school because that's where the opportunities were. You learned a lot working in a university setting. I worked in a maternity setting. I got to work with a lot of young female patients who were of childbearing age. It was a very eye-opening experience.
I will be continuing Ricky Shipman, who has lived in Mount Pleasant for decades. On my father's side of the family, his father was a slave in South Carolina, and his slave owner, he was the last one of his wife's side and on his own side. So he had no one else to give his property to, you know, acres and acres of farmland. Being that him and my grandfather were so close, he gave it to him. So with all the paperwork through the years, they screwed up the paperwork because they didn't want us, a black man, to own all of this land in the middle of Whitesville, South Carolina. So years go by and grandkids get educated, so we want to know what's going on to this land. We go back and they build a whole town on the land. So how can we get our land back? We go to court, paperwork, and it finally came out that it was left to my grandfather. But what do we do now? There's a whole city, houses, hotels, a mall, gas stations, a whole town, a whole city on that property now. We own the property, they own the buildings. So we go there once a year to have a family reunion.
I'll be reading in the voice of Deborah Jones Ford on being in Upper Marion High School. We were the only African Americans in the school. I don't think it's that way now, but there were only 6 of us, and 2 of them were my brothers, and that was an all-time high. I think when I graduated, there were 12 African Americans in a school of 1,000. So that was an experience in itself. But I can honestly say I never experienced discrimination of any sort. Not really. I did well in school. We were just pushed along. I don't think, well, it wasn't comfortable, I guess, sometimes. But I liked school, and I was active. If anything, I would have wanted to have a relationship at school. I probably missed that, not having a boyfriend at school. Like I said, the other guy was my brother, Jack, and they were all you knew. That was probably why I went to an African American university, Lincoln University. So that way I got to experience that. So that was really positive. I don't have anything really negative to say. Or like maybe I'm older, and it was really beautiful that I can only think of the wonderful things. That concludes our presentation on the Voices of Mount Pleasant for 2016. Our class would be happy to now answer any questions you might have and its involvement in Mount Pleasant.
What's the general population in Mount Pleasant? How many folks are we talking about in that community, roughly?
Does anybody know? Yeah? Yeah.
Boys Purple, do you know?
I don't know that we actually have a number per se now. At one time, we did have statistics in terms of the breakout between the number of original people that live there versus college students, rental. But it changes so much now that we really can't give you like the population is, you know. There's statistics on Wayne, but not just on Mount Pleasant. So I guess we'd have to go door to door and kind of
There
figure that.
there are 65 houses. That gives you a sense of the size a little bit. 65 houses, okay, on the 3 streets, okay.
Yeah. And it changes because of the rental. I just wanted to commend the students. You did an excellent job. I think Michaela, you had a question for you?
What was like the most valuable thing that you guys learned from this?
This is from Conestoga students, though.
Could you repeat your question, Michaela?
What was the most valuable thing that you guys learned from this exercise?
I just think it was pretty cool just hearing like your story personally, just to hear like the background to a community that I didn't grow up in, you know, and to see how another person's experience in their childhood. So I thought that was cool.
Who else wants to answer that question?
Well, you learn a lot about Mormon history. You know, you learn about Mormon culture and what people used to do, you know, back in the day. You know, when I was talking to Homer, you know, it was just a general conversation, not really more so an interview, but we were talking about, you know, this and that. I was talking about my grandfather, and he was like, yeah, he may have known him, but it's one of those things. It was just a great experience.
I noticed with Homer, he has more of a colorful way of presenting things. Ricky's kind of like that as well. We had a diverse group that you interviewed this year, which was really great. And incidentally, in case you didn't know, these two are sisters back here and from Mount Pleasant. I was so delighted to see them today. Deborah Jones Ford and Donna Jones Brown. Both of them have been away from the neighborhood for a while, but wonderful, wonderful family people coming up. And this is what we're saying, we're getting away from the family dynamic so much, you know, because now we have a lot of the renters in there. So I appreciated having them there, and also John King this time. And it's funny how his wife, she didn't really grow up in Mount Pleasant, but she was on the other side of Wayne. But for her to just jump in and say, hey, these are some of the things that I experienced, which was good for you to hear, even though it wasn't a part of Mount Pleasant. And we do bring outsiders every once in a while because of their experience. So I hope your take from this was to learn about the community, but also about people. Even when you were doing your speeches just now, different people have different experiences. They're not all going to have the same. The common theme was, yeah, there was prejudice or whatever, or yeah, there was a predominantly white school, but this is how I dealt with it. So that happens, and so it's always a pleasure to have you come in and learn more about our neighborhood. So we're delighted that you were able to do this time. You did a very, very good job. Let's give them another hand, please.
I actually have a question. Just with some of the stories that you guys were reading, did you see any similarities to when you were growing up, like some of the same experiences you saw in high school that they talked about? It may not just be about racism, but maybe classism, like segregation among classes, or just adjusting to adversity as you're trying to figure out who you are as a person.
I might actually answer for you. When my partner had interviewed Homer and I listened to it afterwards, one thing that I could really relate to is him talking about the different cliques that you have while you're in school.
Mm-hmm.
Some people you just naturally connect with, whether it be because you're the same size, because you're the same grades, because you like the same music. But that's something I could really connect with because I went to a performing arts school. So you had instrumentalists, hung out with instrumentalists, you had the vocalists, the vocalists. So it was always like diversity in it, but you had a common goal, you had a common purpose towards each other. So that's one thing I can really relate to school-wise at least.
I mean, I related because where I grew up, it was mainly like, I think it was about like 5 African-American people in my like entire elementary school. Because I grew up in San Francisco, so it was mainly like, you had like a lot of Hispanics, you had a lot of Asians, so literally it was like 5 of us. So I mean, when some of them say, you know, they really went to school with 3 African-American people, like I understand that, you know, to like go there and they're all speaking different languages, and then, you know, you try and like ask them, like, well, what is that? And they're like, you know, no. So I got that.
Yeah, the continuation on, another question?
No, go ahead. I'm just fascinated because I'm listening because I'm 30. I'll be 34, and just to to hear some of the things that they were talking about, I'm like, wait a minute, I was experiencing that, and I'm a child of the 80s. So it's interesting to see there's still so many similar themes in terms of segregation or even cliques or classism, even from the 60s to 70s. And I was just wondering what you guys experience now.
Yeah, on the continuation of the cliques, you know, when I was in middle school, you know,
basically it was like a bunch of elementary schools, coming into one place. And basically they threw us from Lower South, Furta Bar, all 9 yards. And Furta Bar kids hung out with Furta Bar kids, Lower South kids hung out with Lower South kids, basically. And then when everyone got to know each other, it changed to certain groups being with certain groups, like how Homer explained, like those who don't talk to a lot of people, hang with each other. That was my group. And then you got the big old jocks and whatnot. And then around the high school, everyone just got together, and I'm best friends with basically everyone that's from high school. All those situations.
Do you think it's because people are afraid of people that aren't like them? Which is the whole point of learning.
That's what happened basically. When there was, I had my bullies in middle school. We didn't know each other, so basically I didn't know how to react to it. Come around high school, I had become used to it, and basically we learned, we had similar issues in our lives, in terms of, family problems and whatnot. But, it was a gathering.
Sorry, it's nap time.
I feel you, man. I feel you. In that sense, you could say, with the cliques, like history sort of repeats itself. People tend to get together. Like minds together with like minds, and then when people finally learn to get along, everything just comes together.
It'd be nice if people would look beyond color of people's skin or their ethnicity or whatever.
One thing that Homer did say, like, we're having a conversation on it. He says, "I don't see myself as having a race," is what he said. We said basically we're all human. If we just say what race we are when we're just saying we're human, that's one similarity we all have in common, that people tend to look over. Everyone says, "I am a race, I'm from this country." Well, you're a human, aren't you?
Yeah. He had a very diverse group of friends.
There's some other questions back.
Are any of the things that you've learned from the interviews impact your life today?
When we interviewed, we talked about the bus stop thing, and that was a large part of our talking about it. And it was just interesting to me because we were saying how the bus stop comes when I was in high school and even middle school, it came to my driveway, and to hear how Deborah had to walk a mile in the rain and snow just made me be oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for having bus stops come to my driveway nowadays. So it's crazy, but yeah, impact. It just made me grateful for some of the things that I had when I grew up. So.
Do you remember when we walked through Mount Pleasant when we got to Montgomery County, right at my drive? Well, Deborah and Donna lived at the house across from my daughter's house, Jennifer. So that was their home for many, many years. Beautiful family. That particular school went to Upper Marion in King of Prussia. So they had to walk down to the corner as you're leaving Cabrini, that last house on Fletcher Road, where Mrs. Macy B. Hall actually grew up in initially. That was where you had to walk to the bus stop.
That was the short one.
That was the short one. It might have been a longer one. Whereas the Conestoga ones, we were spoiled. We kind of just walked up the street. We thought that was a long way. I won't let Jasmine, a 7-year-old, walk up by herself. But it's still not that far, So one thing I wanted to comment on, when you heard about Keith Hayes, I love that guy. He talks forever, but when he said about he's not concerned about the college students. You have to realize there aren't any college students down at the end of the street, except for the one house where the Cabrini students moved in. Miss Cabrini was there last year. I don't know who's there this year. So he's not impacted by the college students, other than he has a sign out, remember we saw drive like your children live here? So he's really concerned about that. He's an advocate for the children, but he's not impacted, whereas I live in the concentrated section where there are 6 houses. So I don't have a problem with my neighbors. As a matter of fact, one of the moms texted me and said, look out for the UPS package and this kind of thing. But there have been issues. I found out that an unmarked police car was in my drive from 2 o'clock on. He didn't come to my house. I slept right through it. But there was something going on up the street. But that's where you see all of those houses right there that are college rentals. And it's too much of a concentration, which is why we went to the township to kind of make them control it a little bit. and it did work, except for the landlords aren't enforcing, first of all, some of the rules of the community. They don't tell the students, and they get a new group of students in and they don't know, what they're supposed to do or what they can't do. But the other thing is, they don't tell them, the police will come and arrest you. We don't even call them sometimes. They're just there. They don't tell them it's a quiet neighborhood. They don't tell them that, they just kind of find out that, this family's lived there forever, or this family's lived there forever. Because to tell you the truth, we want to look out for them. We'd love to, at least a lot of us would, entertain them, or, we never want anybody to be without, that kind of thing. Everybody should come out together and shovel together, but, it just doesn't happen. So we got to figure out a way, and Dr. Swarzy said maybe in our township meetings, our civic meetings, we should send out a letter and say, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. This is what we expect from you. Because it's not fair if the landlords aren't doing their part, to expect students to know what they can or cannot do in the neighborhood. So I was interested in what Keith said, because he's not really impacted by that. I didn't know, I've known Ricky Shipman all my life. I didn't know about his father owning the land down there, but it made me think of something very interesting. The King of Prussia Mall, as large as it is built on a piece of property that actually a black woman owned for years. The deed was in the wrong place. Instead of being in Montgomery County, they found it. Her granddaughter or great-granddaughter was an attorney. Somehow they looked it up. They found she was living in a shack, and here she owned all of this land, and it was in the paper, and then all of a sudden they hushed it up. I'm telling you, Al Sharpton, NAACP, all these attorneys got involved, and they probably paid her off to go away, but she deserved billions of dollars in taxes from the King of Prussia Mall, and that actually was her property. A slave owner had given it to her, and the deed was lost, or one of her grandparents or something. The deed was lost, and when they found out she owned the land, what are you gonna do? You've had a shopping center there for 40 years. What are you gonna do now? You can't claim it back. So that was a very interesting fact. That was in the paper for a while, and then I heard nothing else about it. So very interesting fact.
Who else would like to ask a question?
Did you guys know what you were getting into? Like with my purple guy shirt.
Purple.
Just because it's such a beautiful color. Did you guys, this is for everybody, did you guys know what you were getting into? I see you have friends up here. Did your friends tell you to sign up for the class? And if you didn't know, what was your perception after Dr. Swarzy told you what was going to begin to happen with this project? Were you thinking, oh, I don't know about that, or what were some of your thoughts? What are some of your reflections now that you get here now about this project?
We had a pretty good idea coming into the class.
Okay.
That's my roommate there, Brandon Weaver.
Brandon Weaver. He government. How you doing?
Yeah.
He took this class last semester with Swarzy.
Okay.
And I had the pleasure of taking this class before. I really felt like I had a great experience with the class.
Okay.
For my project, when I actually went with a different scope, and I interviewed the students of Mount Pleasant to see, because what the class teaches us is we're hearing about this, but I wanted to confront it from the first-hand experience. And we saw the different sides. I interviewed another resident. Fortunately, I don't remember his name because it was in October when I interviewed him. But I took the different scopes of both, and I drew up an agreement. And my question for Miss Bird would be at this point, with my class and then this class, what is there any progress that they're making with the Cabrini students from the beginning of the year till now?
I would say yes. From my perspective, from what I've been hearing, I haven't seen a lot of the partying.
That's good.
And everything, and I don't know if you were instrumental because you knew some of the people in the neighborhood or what. I'd like to think that. But it's been pretty quiet this year, believe it or not. And I would also like to think that the landlords were being more selective because they did get fined a couple times. Okay. I know my neighbor did because I told you the story about all the beer bottles in my yard and that kind of thing. So some years are good, some years are bad. The problem with that is it changes every year. So how do you wrap your hands around that? but it does help the fact that students like you walk through the neighborhood, as you saw the cars going up down the street. We try to introduce you to as many people as we can. We encourage you to come rent from us. We want you to feel like you're a part of the neighborhood. College students aren't bad. I mean, we all went to college, so college students aren't bad. We just don't want one or two bad eggs to ruin it for everybody. We love you to be in our neighborhood. We love the fact that it's a diverse neighborhood, young versus old, you know, that type thing. So you're certainly welcome to go in any neighborhood. We just think that no matter where you go, you learn what the tone of the neighborhood is and what we expect from you. Just like if I went to San Francisco, I'd have to learn a whole new culture. So that's the kind of thing that we look at.
I think it's interesting because my field is I'm a property manager,
Mm-hmm.
so I've dealt with a lot of rentals and a lot of the complaints for people that are established in their homes is that you have these transient residents coming in and they don't respect the history, they don't understand the culture, they don't understand the rules. And I think some of the challenge is one, you have to punish the landlords, you have to punish the people because just because you're not there doesn't mean you're ignorant to what's going on. And I also think, and this is just something I've seen with certain communities I've had, when the more established reaches out to the renters or the tenants, I think they feel a more sense of a community and they take a little bit more care, a little bit more pride. So I think this is a great opportunity to really connect the Cabrini students with the history of this area. And that way you can start policing yourselves, because there's so much to learn from other people, whether it's ethnicities, gender, things like that. And you find out there's more in common than that's different. And I think that you guys did a really great job. I really enjoyed your interviews. I just encourage you to share with your friends and your classmates, especially the ones that move off campus. Encourage them to get to know the people there, and let them get a piece of the history for themselves, because you might see them change in terms of their behavior and how they carry themselves when they're living off campus. Because you don't want that. You don't want people to say, "Oh, all clusters are bad," because they're not. Just like not all renters or not all landlords are bad. You just have those few bad apples that ruin the whole entire trade.
Anybody here in the?
A question that relates to the use of a couple of words that I heard in some of your dialogues, especially the use of the word neighborhood. Sometimes I hear the word community used, and other times I hear the word neighborhood. And I'm wondering if there's something qualitative in the difference of those terms. They could be synonymous, but I think I'm trying to figure out whether or not, maybe there's something more in terms of bonding when you think about a neighborhood as opposed to a community. And it might in part relate to some of the things that you're talking about in terms of the transient nature of what happens, people coming and going into this particular area. I'm just curious from your conversations with the people that you were interviewing, whether or not, how they were thinking in terms of the word neighborhood and community, and whether or not has any impact on, what the expectations are in terms of their own well-being within that particular area. We'll call it a neighborhood, I won't call it a community.
I guess you could say, okay, well, I guess you can, as a start off, like for me, when my partner interviewed and I listened to, the use of the word neighborhood to me, it was just like a neighborhood will always be there. It's gonna have different people coming in and out, but the community aspect of it is where you have that, what you call it, communion, where you have all of us, we come together, we are one union. So I guess that's how you can separate it from neighborhood, because the neighborhood's always going to be there, but community, that's where the behaviors of the people come in. At least in my opinion, at least that's why I take from Homer.
I was just gonna say the same thing. I think that, even when you look at a map, they classify it as different neighborhoods, but the fact that they're talking about that they used to have a community center that everyone would like to come to, it just seems more like a gathering space, everybody. And you can take pride in saying, this is my community, I grew up in that community, versus that's my neighborhood, or I just took it that way.
Yeah, the thing is, I was saying, a community is made up of people, while a neighborhood is made up of buildings, in this sense. Like when I was talking with Homer, I think there was a section where after our interview, we were talking similarities, how he's just like my grandfather in all the senses and whatnot. My grandfather was a drinking man, he was a drinking man. And he was saying how people would just leave their doors unlocked, and if there was a situation with someone's kid the parent would, not only would they be reprimanded by, the friend of the family, they would get even worse back at home.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, it's just extremely tight-knit. And I remember another story that my grandmother told me. Yeah, there's a situation with her and my mother, not her and my mother, but one of my mother's friends who were picking on her. My grandmother goes over, walks over, and sees her. He's like, I know your mother. I see her at Sunday school all the time. It was just, it was just very tight-knit. And my grandmother was always telling me, it's so tight-knit, like whenever, someone either passes away, like say, people from her high school, someone she knew for such a long time. That person was living in Florida, and she knew, like, the day of, that when they passed away, like, they hear it immediately. It's just so tight-knit. They always have the numbers. They never change their numbers over the years. It's just that tight-knit of, like, a community that they've known each other for so long. When you hear a neighborhood, people come and go, in that sense.
One of the classes actually said that, I think it was last year, that they've been in their neighborhood for years and they don't know anybody. Whereas at Mount Pleasant, pretty much we used to know everybody, and everybody, if somebody was having a barbecue, you didn't have to be invited, you just kind of went, and so that was the fun part of the community. It was a close-knit community. You went to the community center, you did things together as a group. Not so much anymore, but we still know who's who. We still know enough to know that, the Bird family's still there, the Jackson family's still there. There's certain families that have been there for decades, like the Shipman family and other families. And then you know which ones pretty much are the rental places where there is a transient crowd. So, hope that answers your question.
Who else would like to ask a question? Anybody else? Anybody on the panel want to add anything to your, but, no? Yeah.
She's like, I'm good.
That's all right. Anybody besides John? All right. John said he hung around with the quiet people, but he's not quiet in class, right? All right. Okay, John, what you want to say?
Yeah, so from my experience with Homer, it really brought light to a lot of things. It brought a lot of similarities. How when my dad's neighborhood, nowadays, thinking today, he doesn't call it like the neighborhood. He calls it the complex, because there's like 4 houses where everybody knows each other. We'll have our one neighbor in the back. We call him. I can't remember his name exactly because I haven't been there about a couple months. But we basically, everyone can freely go in each other's houses. It's that unlocked door policy that they had. Whenever they see someone else in the neighborhood, it's kind of like someone who's not supposed to be there. We immediately know. It's very close knit. Our one neighbor, Jim, we call him, very nice guy. He'll immediately call us when someone's over at the house, whether my brother be or it's tight knit. It's reminds me of how it used to be for my grandfather and Homer. Brought these stories. It's a good thing to hear that people can get together.
You've been in touch with him again, right?
Yes, I called him Easter. Basically, I'm actually helped him find this one guy he knew from Cabrini. Paul K. Worked at horticulture or something with plants. He was a Pollock. I can't remember exactly his name. Can't figure out his last name though. It's a Paul K. That's rings a bell at all.
Well, if there's no further questions, all right, we want to thank you all for coming one more time.